A lot of football going on. We told you Antonio Brown has asked the Steelers for a trade. We'll get the latest on that. Also, some other interesting moves. The Texans went out this season, made the trade at the deadline for Demaryius Thomas. Today, they have cut him. Yesterday, we told you about Kareem Hunt. It's a crowded backfield in Cleveland. If you are Howie Roseman, John McMullen, are you picking up the phone and maybe asking for Nick Chubb or Duke Johnson is going to be a question I think you're going to hear a lot probably this week. The trickle-down effect of adding Kareem Hunt to that team. Now, I know he's probably going to be suspended, so I'm assuming one of those guys probably has to stick around, but there's a lot of intriguing things here. Let's start with Antonio Brown, though. He has officially asked the Steelers for a trade. He tweeted out, "Peace, I'm out of here. It's time. 9 years. I gave it to you. I'm out." Is this the end of Antonio Brown in Pittsburgh?
I think ultimately, yeah, he won't be back because I think there's too many issues off the field, but it's really, really difficult. We've kind of explained this type of thing with Nick Foles, and not from a personality standpoint, obviously, but from a sign and trade standpoint, just because the value of the franchise tag is so much, it lessens any potential asset coming back. Same thing with Antonio Brown. His contract's huge. So you can talk about trading him. You can talk about how good a receiver he is, and he certainly is, but you're not going to get much back because you got to pay him. So people understand that, and they're not going to be handing over first and second round picks for that contract. So it's either take a very difficult gulp either way from a cap standpoint, whether they trade him before March 17th or release him. It's difficult from that standpoint from Pittsburgh's perspective, but it's one of those things where I think it's irreconcilable differences. I don't think they can bring him back.
What does this do to Pittsburgh, losing potentially Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell?
Well, we'll have to see. Obviously, it hurts them offensively, so you have to go about things a different way. They proved that they could be very, very successful without Le'Veon Bell last season, but without both of them, I think it becomes much more problematic. So they've been so explosive for so long, with sort of a new age version of the triplets, Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown. To not have two of them, it's going to make it more difficult to play offensive football. No question about that.
Yeah, that should be interesting. Any teams, I know San Francisco is one we threw out at the top, but any makes sense for Antonio Brown? I mean, he's a guy, going to be on the other side of 30?
Yeah, he's going to be 31, so that's always a dangerous time in the NFL, and people understand why for a couple reasons. Not only is longevity in this sport always in question, but also if you're really, really good at that age, you're getting paid really, really well, and that's where Antonio is. But from a football standpoint, he can help anybody. Let's be honest. This is a top 5 receiver in football. This is arguably the best receiver in football. But there are other things you have to put into the soup, so to speak, and one is the off-the-field stuff. There have been a number of issues, potential domestic issue, driving issue, and then the locker room issues as well. So that's in it. The salary's in it. What happened in the bitterness of the divorce, you got to throw that into it. But from just a pure football standpoint, I mean, that guy's as good as it gets.
John, Kareem Hunt going to Cleveland. They've got Nick Chubb. They've got Duke Johnson. Real quick, before we get to the Hunt, let's go to back to Brown real quick. If you're Howie Roseman, do you make a call? Because as you wrote at 97.3 ESPN.com today, the talk with Golden Tate doesn't appear to be going very well.
No, it doesn't. But this is a different level receiver, not only from the point, but also a monetary standpoint. The Eagles are really, really, really up against it, at least early from the cap standpoint. If they're going to franchise tag Nick Foles, it's impossible to go after a player like Antonio Brown before you make a move with Nick. So just from where they are from a cap standpoint, I don't think they can get into the Antonio Brown sweepstakes.
All right, now let's go to Hunt because they got Chubb, they got Duke Johnson, Howie Roseman. You pick up the phone and call Cleveland and say, let's make a deal.
Well, I think Howie's going to go everywhere to try and improve the running back situation. So he's going to look at the trade market. He's going to look at the draft, and I think ultimately you might see you're definitely going to see a new running back in Philadelphia, maybe two. They have to fix that position and get it more stable. I think it's been the one glaring issue on the offensive side of the football, just no consistency from week to week. Part of that was injury-related, obviously, when Jay Ajayi went down. But nonetheless, they have to fix that position. So he's going to look under every rock. But Cleveland, I mean, they don't have to do anything from a standpoint of signing Kareem Hunt because they got him on a one-year deal minimum. He's got to prove himself. Nothing is guaranteed. And he's going to be suspended. We'll wait and see how long. But until he's actually back and if he ever becomes a contributor, I don't think they think about moving either of those guys because they'll be the running backs until they get Kareem Hunt, until they can get him up to speed.
Well, it's interesting because Chubb was fantastic at the end of last year, and then what's the message to him that you brought in Kareem Hunt?
Yeah, you always have to worry about that when you bring in players into an organization. I think from John Dorsey's standpoint, he drafted him in Kansas City, likes him as a player. It's just a low-risk, high-reward signing from a football standpoint. If it works out, if it doesn't, you can easily move on. So if you get ownership on board and you get them willing to take the PR hits, and they've taken a lot of them, it's basically no risk from the football team standpoint. And right now, Chubb is their lead back, and that won't change until after suspension is completed, and then he'll come in and compete. But I think it's from their standpoint, it's just an opportunity to add a really talented player with virtually, as I said, no risk.
John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter, talking a little NFL. Former Eagle Vinny Curry released after one season down in Tampa Bay.
Bring him back.
Right. That's the first thing I got. Would the Eagles be interested in bringing him back? Now, they're going to need some defensive line help, right? I mean, they're going to have Brandon Graham probably in limbo, Chris Long probably in limbo here, so there are probably going to be some openings.
Yeah, obviously it depends. I mean, it certainly everyone seems to think Brandon Graham is out of here. I don't think that's the move the Eagles should make for a number of reasons, both on and off the field. But if he's gone, if Chris Long retires, then you need some bodies at the position. Derek Barnett's going to be a starter. He'll be back from injury. Michael Bennett will be here, so he would be the other starter. But you still need rotational pieces. And even a guy like Josh Sweat is coming off a significant injury. Nobody has clearly identified it, but the whispers you hear is an Achilles. So it was a pretty significant injury, and he's got an injury history to begin with. So they do need bodies. Vinny's over 30, though. He's a declining player. I think they want to get younger at that particular position. However, if, as I said, if they lose both Graham and Long, they do need bodies. And if it comes down, they can't get younger options in the draft, younger players they like, and they can get them on a minimum deal, a veteran minimum deal, and he can play 25-30% of snaps. He accepts that role. Then I think there would be a place for him. But that's a lot of ifs. That's a lot of caveats before you bring in a player like Vinny Curry. I was talking to Josh off air. Everybody wants to bring back what everybody is comfortable with, what they're comfortable with. And at some point, you got to turn the page from Vinny Curry, LaShawn McCoy, Deshaun Jackson. Got to look forward, not back.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think Curry, disappointing. I thought he had some good years with Chip Kelly playing out of position, and people thought, wow, when he gets put into his natural position, he's going to be really good. And why did it not materialize for him?
Yeah, I think they just overvalued him as a player, to be honest. If you remember, there was an issue here. Remember, Vinny signed a big deal, and he was getting paid more.
And that was based on that he had put up – he was productive playing out of position. Yeah,
and he always, as a substitutional player, as a rotational player, you're right, under Chip, he always put up big pass rushing numbers in limited opportunities. So some people kind of projected that as a full-time player, and he'd be this double-digit sack guy, and it never materialized. And all of a sudden, Brandon Graham took off, and then you had that situation where Vinny's getting paid more than Brandon, and Brandon's clearly the better player. So it didn't work out, and I think it's an issue where they misjudged and overvalued Vinny as a player.
John, what about Golden Tate? Any interest in bringing him back? I mean, you wrote about it today that he questions his future in Philadelphia, but it seemed pretty obvious that it just wasn't a great fit.
No, I don't think it was, and I think I go back to when they made the trade and when Howie Roseman had his press conference, and I was the one who asked the question about there being redundancies between Nelson Aguilar and Golden Tate as players. And obviously the Eagles looked at it in a different way, but I think you saw half a season, and they were pretty redundant as players. They're both slot receivers, and you can't play them both in the slot.
If they had a full training camp and Tate was the guy and Aguilar wasn't here, would they be better?
Yeah, I think they would be. I think Golden's a better player than Nelson Aguilar. Going to get yelled at by Nelson for that. But I think he is. I mean, you do have to be concerned about the age and the contract and things of that nature. But this is a proven player who's produced in Seattle at a high level, produced in Detroit at a high level for a lot of years. I think if he was here for a full off season, if he was that slot receiver and you're playing 11 personnel, I think you're a better team with him than Nelson Aguilar. And I do think one of them will be back. The question is, which one? I don't think the Eagles want Nelson Aguilar back with his fifth-year rookie option, which pays him near $10 million. So they have to rework a deal with Nelson or work out an extension with Golden Tate. I think one of them will be back. I don't think both of them will be back.
Read more on the Golden Tate situation at 973ESPN.com. Download the mobile app, and you can read it right on your phone. You can also read John's piece on the Eagles hoping to turn the page on this manufactured quarterback controversy, if you will. And are they taking measures to try to get past this? Or, I mean, what are some of the things they're trying to do to kind of get this in the rear view?
Well, I think they encourage players to go on social media and defend Carson. I know that the guys at the Pro Bowl were asked to speak about Carson and what kind of teammate he was, and I don't think it's any coincidence, and I think you were at the game, Mike, where Carson was sitting next to Alshon Jeffrey at the Sixers game. I don't think that was two friends saying, hey, let's go to the Sixers game. I think that was manufactured for a particular reason, and I think it's evident why, as a lot of people, a lot of the amateur detectives out there, as I've called them, have tried to narrow down who spoke in a disparate fashion. I'm not saying it was Alshon Jeffrey by any stretch of the imagination, but he's been, I called it, a person of interest for the amateur detectives. So I think they wanted to get them together, a little kumbaya moment, And I think those are the kinds of things the Eagles are trying to do.
I will tell you this. I was there, yes, and 3 guys, actually 4, were put on the Jumbotron. Mike Trout, Carson, and Alshon together, and Allen Iverson. Now, Trout went up first. He got a nice, loud cheer. Then Carson and Alshon, and that place erupted. But nothing like the sound that place had when Allen Iverson got put up. That guy's still number 1 in that building.
Yeah, well, remember, it's a Sixers crowd, and he's incredibly popular.
Yeah, but there's a lot of times when the Eagle players are there. Like when I was there in December or January and they were going to the playoffs and Alshon was there or Michael Bennett was there, Nate Sudfeld was there, and that place erupted.
Yeah, I mean, well, Allen is a legend, not only a Hall of Famer, but arguably the best under 6-foot player in the history of basketball. And for whatever reason, his personality always resonated with this fan base. So he's always been incredibly popular and really bulletproof. I mean, there's a lot of stories about Allen off the court and not being professional, but these fans have always loved him.
Sure did. And by the way, Friday night, when Embiid had the block down the one end and came down and hit a bucket down the other, Iverson about ran to half court. That guy is the best fan in the building. He is so – it's unbelievable watching him run up and down the damn sidelines at these games. But, yeah, big cheers for Alshon and Carson Wentz at the Sixers game the other night. All right, for more on the NFL. By the way, quick quip on this story. ABC network television, John, is going to air – what's that?
Yeah, the scouting combine?
Is going to air the quarterback and wide receiver drills from the draft combine.
Yeah,
They're going to put this in prime time? I mean, come on.
It's amazing the popularity of this league. And especially, I've talked about a lot, TV as a whole, the eroding ratings because there's so much competition. There's so many other ways to watch things. A new generation that generally doesn't watch a lot of TV, at least in a conventional fashion. The one thing they can count on is the NFL and professional football. It delivers. And I don't know. At some point, you would think it's going to get oversaturated, but compared to everything else, people keep tuning in. And you'll see the ratings of that thing, and it'll beat NBA games. It'll kill NHL games. It's pretty amazing.
Crazy. For more on the NFL and the Eagles, check out 97.3 ESPN.com. Follow John on Twitter at JF McMullen. We give you football all year long right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, Mike.